More than 2,200 people went to sleep that night, believing they were completely safe. They were sailing on the most advanced ship in the world, a floating palace built with the best engineering of its time. The crew trusted it. The passengers trusted it. Even the newspapers trusted it. Many people believed one bold claim: this ship was practically unsinkable. But what if the real danger wasn't the iceberg at all? What if the disaster began with something much smaller? A few ignored warnings, a missing tool, and a decision made with too much confidence. That ship was the legendary RMS Titanic. In April 1912, it began its first journey across the Atlantic Ocean. The voyage started from Southampton, and the destination was New York City. For the passengers on board, the trip felt like a dream. First-class travelers enjoyed luxurious dining halls, elegant staircases, and comfortable suites. Second-class passengers experienced service better than most hotels of that era. Even third-class travelers had better conditions than many ships before. The ship represented human progress. It was owned by the powerful shipping company White Star Line, and it quickly became a global sensation. At the time, Titanic was the largest passenger ship ever built. Its designers believed the ship was extremely safe. The hull contained multiple watertight compartments. If water entered one section, heavy doors could seal it off. The idea sounded brilliant, but there was one important detail. The ship could survive flooding in 4 compartments, not 5. And unfortunately, no one imagined that an iceberg could damage more than that. Meanwhile, as the Titanic sailed across the North Atlantic, something important started happening. Other ships began sending warnings. Radio messages arrived reporting dangerous ice ahead. Large ice fields, floating ice chunks, and several massive icebergs drifting in the same region. These warnings reached the Titanic's wireless room. But the operators had another problem to deal with. Passengers were constantly sending personal messages to land. Business updates, greetings to family, social messages announcing the luxury journey. The wireless system became overloaded. Because of this, some iceberg warnings were delayed or not treated as urgent. On the bridge, the ship continued moving forward at nearly full speed. The captain, Edward Smith, was highly experienced. He had spent decades at sea. But like many others, he believed Titanic was strong enough to handle rough conditions. So the ship kept moving quickly through icy waters. As April 14 arrived, night slowly covered the Atlantic Ocean. The temperature dropped sharply. Above the deck, 2 lookouts stood inside a small observation post known as the Crow's Nest. Their job was simple but critical: watch the ocean carefully and report any danger. However, there was one important detail most passengers never knew about. The lookouts did not have binoculars. Earlier in the voyage, the locker that stored the binoculars had been locked. The key was accidentally taken by an officer who was replaced before departure. No one realized the mistake until it was too late. So the lookouts relied only on their eyes in the freezing darkness. The ocean that night was strangely calm. Normally, waves break against icebergs, creating white foam that helps sailors spot them. But the water that night looked like black glass. Silent, flat, deceptively peaceful. The Titanic continued cutting through the darkness at high speed. Below deck, passengers slept peacefully in warm cabins. Some were dreaming about arriving in America. Others were still talking and laughing in lounges. No one knew that a massive wall of ice was slowly drifting in the ship's path. Then suddenly, one of the lookouts noticed something strange in the distance. A dark shadow directly ahead. At first, it looked like a small blur, but within seconds, it became clear. It was enormous. The lookout grabbed the phone and immediately called the bridge. "Iceberg, right ahead!" The officers reacted instantly. Orders were shouted across the bridge. The wheel was turned sharply. The engines were reversed. The gigantic ship began trying to change direction. But ships that large cannot turn quickly. Momentum kept pushing Titanic forward through the icy water. And then, it happened. The iceberg brushed against the side of the ship. It didn't sound like an explosion. Many passengers barely noticed anything. Just a small vibration, a strange scraping sound. But deep below the surface of the ocean, several steel plates had already bent inward. Cold seawater began rushing into multiple compartments. And slowly, quietly, the ship that people believed could never sink had already been fatally damaged. But the most shocking mistakes were still about to happen. Because after the collision, a series of decisions would turn a survivable accident into the deadly sinking of the RMS Titanic. At first, many passengers believed nothing serious had happened. There was no loud explosion, no dramatic shaking, just a strange scraping sound and a small vibration through the ship. Some people even joked about it. But deep below the deck of the RMS Titanic, the situation was already turning dangerous. Seawater had started flooding several compartments. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, quickly inspected the damage. What he discovered was terrifying. Water was pouring into 5 different compartments, and the Titanic had only been designed to survive flooding in 4. That meant something shocking. The ship would sink. Slowly, but inevitably. When Andrews explained this to the captain, Edward Smith, the reality became impossible to ignore. The most advanced ship in the world had less than 3 hours left. Orders were quickly given to prepare the lifeboats. But here came another mistake. The Titanic did not carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board. There were only 20 lifeboats, enough space for around 1,100 people. But more than 2,200 passengers and crew were on the ship. At the time, shipping laws focused on ship size, not passenger capacity. So technically, Titanic followed the rules. But those rules were dangerously outdated. When the crew started preparing the lifeboats, another problem appeared. Many passengers refused to get inside them. The ship still looked safe. It was brightly lit. The band was still playing music. People struggled to believe the giant ship could actually sink. Some passengers said they would rather stay on the warm ship than sit in a small lifeboat in the freezing Atlantic night. Because of this confusion, the first lifeboats were launched half empty. Some carried only 20 or 30 people, even though they could hold more. Precious time and space were wasted. Meanwhile, the tilt of the ship slowly became noticeable. Passengers began realizing something seriously wrong. Crew members started shouting instructions. Women and children first. Families were separated in seconds. Some husbands placed their wives and children into lifeboats, knowing they might never see them again. As hours passed, the Titanic's bow sank deeper into the water. The freezing Atlantic Ocean began creeping closer to the deck. Panic started spreading across the ship. People rushed toward the remaining lifeboats, but there were not enough spaces left. Then the lights flickered. For a moment, the entire ship seemed to pause in darkness. Shortly after 2 a.m., the front half of the ship was already underwater. The enormous weight pulled the rest of the ship downward. Suddenly, the structure couldn't hold any longer. With a terrifying crack, the Titanic broke apart. One section sank first. The other briefly rose into the air before disappearing beneath the Atlantic Ocean forever. Within minutes, the unsinkable ship had vanished beneath the freezing water. More than 1,500 people lost their lives that night. The disaster shocked the entire world. News of the tragedy spread rapidly across newspapers and radio reports. The sinking of the Titanic became one of the most famous maritime disasters in history. Later, investigations revealed something heartbreaking. The iceberg alone